Growing up, I didn't know anything about personal finance. Everything seemed too complicated and risky, and I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until later that I discovered the secret to financial freedom was actually keeping things really simple. So, here are 7 rules for financial minimalism. The first rule is to simplify your bank accounts. Some people have 10 or even 15 different bank accounts because they have one for their rent or mortgage, another one for their car payment, their cell phone, their birthdays, emergency fund, and this is super complicated and there's more chances for overdrafts. What I do and what experts recommend is having 2 accounts at 2 different banks. Your first account is going to be your checking account. So when you get paid or you have direct deposit, which I strongly recommend you have, all your money goes into this account. And this account is for paying your bills and your everyday spending. Generally, it's a good idea to keep 1 to 2 months worth of expenses inside this account. All your other money for savings should be moved to your second account, which is going to be a high yield savings account. And the reason why you want to have this to be a separate account is for 2 reasons. The first reason is a high yield savings account is going to offer a lot more interest than your typical bank would. Right now, rates are above 4%, which is really good. The second reason is you want to keep your savings money separate from your spending money. So you obviously don't mix up your wallet and your piggy bank, right? So you want to keep your spending money separate and your saving money separate so you know exactly how much you have of each. Another reason too, a high yield savings account is going to be a little bit more secure because nobody else is going to have access to this account. So your high yield savings account is going to be good for long-term savings. So this is for your emergency fund, or if you're saving up for any big purchases, maybe it's a down payment or a wedding, or if you have travel plans. Some really good banks you can use are Ally Bank, SoFi, and American Express. They have really high interest rates and there's no minimums and no fees. I also have a link for SoFi in the description where you can earn $25 just for opening an account. They also give you $300 if you set up direct deposit. All these banks that I listed have something called sub-accounts or buckets. This is where you can organize your savings within the same account. Rule number 2 is to automate your savings. When I was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, it talked about paying yourself first, but I quite didn't understand it at the time until later. What this basically means is when you get paid, you automatically take a portion of that paycheck and put it inside your savings account. And this is super helpful because even if you're a big spender and you're really bad with money, if you automate your savings, you don't have to worry about savings because you've already done it. So what you want to do is log into your high yield savings account and set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your high yield savings account. So let's say you get paid on the 1st of every month. Maybe on the 3rd of every month, you set up a transfer so you're saving money automatically. So how much should you actually be saving? Some people say 10%, other people say 20%, and they're both kind of wrong. How much you're able to save will really depend on your income level. If you're living on minimum wage, saving 10% might be super difficult for you, while a high earner, saving 20% for them might be super easy. So save as much as you can. Rule number 3 is to have 1 credit card. And I know credit cards can be a bit of a hot topic among experts. People like Dave Ramsey say you should never have a credit card ever. And I think the reason for that is because only 50% of people pay off their credit card every single month. So half of people are paying all this extra interest on their credit cards. And there was a MIT study that shows that people do spend more when they spend with credit cards. And this is kind of true for me. If I'm deciding if I want to buy something, I'll be like, well, I do get 2% cash back. But here's my view. If you're already saving the money you're supposed to and hitting your savings goal, it doesn't matter if you're spending a little bit extra money. Credit cards are also a little bit safer to use because they do have fraud protection. So if someone steals your credit cards and goes on a shopping spree, you don't have to pay for any of that. Rule number 4 is to invest in index funds. When I was growing up, I thought investing was about doing a bunch of research, looking at charts, picking the right stocks at the right time. And it wasn't until much later I found out that was the wrong way to invest. A really easy way to invest long-term that's super passive, and actually what Warren Buffett recommends most people do, is invest in an index fund. So what index funds do is take all the stocks in the stock market and puts it inside one fund that you can buy really easily. And this works because the stock market is always going up long-term. So if you look at the historical data, the stock market actually increases about 10% a year on average. So if you were 20 years old and invested just $100 every single month into the S&P 500, by the time you were 65 years old, you would have almost $1 million. Rule number 5 is to avoid debt. And I do think there is good and bad debt. Good debt is when you're taking on debt so you can make more money later on. But if you're just buying things and putting it on your credit card and not paying it off, that's debt you don't want to have. For me personally, I don't like debt at all because I don't like the idea of having to pay someone back. So for me, like just that psychological reason is enough for me to avoid debt. If you do take on debt, I think you should be really smart about it. So college is a great example. I know people that went to a 4-year university and they have like $500 or $800 payments every single month paying that back. Instead, you might want to consider something like a technical school. I went to a tech school and I got my associates for only $13,000, which is really cheap compared to a big university. If you do have a lot of debt, there's something you can do called the debt snowball method. This is where you list all your debts from lowest to highest, and you make the minimum payments on all of them except the lowest payment. And the lowest payment you want to try to pay off as quickly as possible. So when the debt is paid off, you'll have more money to move on to the second lowest debt and then pay that off. So as you pay off debts, you're freeing up more money every month to tackle the bigger and bigger debts. Rule number 6 is to have a rainy day fund. A rainy day fund is just a small emergency fund, usually $1,000 for unexpected expenses. So you might have a car repair, a plumbing repair, a doctor's visit, or you need a new cell phone, and all these things might happen. And instead of taking on more credit card debt, you can use your emergency fund instead. If you already have a rainy day fund set up, you can start working on reducing your debt and setting up a long-term emergency fund. Your long-term emergency fund is going to be 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and this is good so if you're unable to work, you still have money coming in. Rule number 7 is to reduce your spending. Even if you're a high earner, it doesn't make sense to overspend. There's a lot of things you can do to save money that won't even affect your lifestyle. For example, you can shop around for car insurance or get a cheaper cell phone plan. I use Mint Mobile and I only pay $15 a month.